Today was day 3 in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, accused in the death of George Floyd. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Duffy. Our guests tonight are Sacramento civil rights attorney Mark Marin and Dr. Bruce Haines, sociology professor at UC Davis. Thank you both for being with us.
Our pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
So we saw a lot of new video from today. The day that George Floyd died was played in court. Let's listen in. The video you're looking at right now is from inside the store known as Cup Foods just before George Floyd was killed. It was Memorial Day 2020, and you can see Floyd in the newly released video walking around the store. The witness who was on the stand today said he talked with Floyd and thought it was a friendly exchange, but also said that he thought Floyd might have been high. At one point, that same witness says Floyd purchased a pack of cigarettes with what the employee, believed to be a counterfeit bill. An attorney for the state asked the employee about what happened after that. Let's take a listen.
At the time that you were working on May 25th of 2020, what was the store policy about cashiers accepting $20 bills?
The policy was that if you took a counterfeit bill, you would have to pay for it out of your money or your paycheck.
It gives you an incentive to be careful about what you take.
Yes.
All right. So did you think that bill might not be legitimate?
I did.
So what did you decide to do?
I took it anyways, and I was planning to just put it on my tab until I second guessed myself. And as you can see in the video, I kept examining it, and then I eventually told my manager.
And of course, that's eventually what led to police being called. So I want to start with you, Mr. Marin. How serious of a crime is actually passing a counterfeit bill, and what did you learn from that employee's testimony today?
Well, it's not serious. It may be no crime at all. It requires that the person who has the bill knows it's counterfeit. Otherwise, it could be any of us. Just passing a bill that was given to us is change for some other purchase. However, if you know it's counterfeit, and you're in the business of counterfeiting and passing counterfeit bills, then it's a federal offense and could be punishable by significant periods of jail time, prison time, up to 20 years probably.
But what we did hear in court today is that no one actually did think that he knew that it was counterfeit, and that's why they gave him a lot of time, kept walking back and forth to the car. So Dr. Haines,
Right.
does it matter? We've heard that he might have been high. That was something that was talked about today, but does it matter if he was at the time?
Well, the question is, does it matter to who? Whether does it matter to the jury or not, we don't know. But does it matter in a practical sense? No, it's completely irrelevant, it seems to me, to this case. What's relevant is the conduct of the police here.
So, Mr. Marin, I know it's early, but what's your impression of the trial so far?
It's an amazing trial. I've never seen anything like this. It's no holds barred. Everything's coming in. Seems like they tossed the rules of evidence out the window. Usually you don't get witnesses saying how they felt and what they thought about things, speculating, talking about their own family, and their that just doesn't happen. It seems like both the prosecution and the defense figure that, well, everybody knows about the killing anyway, so it won't prejudice anybody. It'll let all the details come in. And maybe the defense is figuring that they're going to get an opening somehow.
I think we're getting a little sound from the video that we were just watching there. Sorry about that. But tell me, Mr. Marin, what do you think is the bigger question here?
Well, really, the bigger question is who's responsible. I mean, we know that Chauvin is the one who had his knee on Floyd's neck, and that led directly to his death. But according to Chauvin, look at all the people standing around. They were also officers. They didn't say anything. They didn't drag Chauvin off. They didn't tell him to stop. So that's, according to them, that's the way things go. That's policy. They're acting normally. So really who's responsible is the society, which says this is what we want. If we want that kind of policing, that's what we're going to get. But I think this trial is really getting people to think, you know, they're out of control. This is not what we want. We want them to be more considerate. We want them to work for us as servants. And that's what all this defund the police is about now. We want a different approach. We want a community sensitive approach. We want other things that will get at the root of crime and stop crime from happening. That's what the jury's going to look at, I think. And if that's the case, then they're going to judge Chauvin as whether he violated any one of the 3 crimes he's charged with. And I think they may very well find him that he acted with a depraved mind and therefore has committed second-degree murder. I think that's very possible. And certainly he was culpably negligent, grossly negligent, and in that way will be convicted of manslaughter.
Okay, well, I do want to ask you a little bit more about that in just a bit, but Dr. Haines, we saw a lot of police body cam footage today, and it's hard to watch. So how impactful do you think this video that we've seen played over and over will be on this trial?
It makes me wonder what's in the defense team's mind. It seems that watching these videos over and over, to me, is a little bit like watching the old snuff films that were popular in the late, I guess the early 1980s, where people were actually killed on film. And this was a high def version of it that the world got to see repeatedly. And so it seems to me that very much the jury was strongly impacted today, and this was a devastating day for the defense team, it seems to me.
Mr. Marin, what do you think about all that video that's being played?
I think in some sense it could be a catharsis. You saw every witness get up there and break down because it's so horrible. What they got to see was just devastating. You don't see that in real life. You shouldn't. So I think that's certainly true. But now that the society has gotten to see it all, now we're at the judgment phase. And I think unless Chauvin turns it around and says, "Hey, look, I was doing what I was trained to do. I was right there as far as I was concerned. Things were okay." Unless the jury believes that, he's gone down. He's going to be convicted. But I hope that if that's what happens, we have real change that results from this, that they look at the police force itself, they look at how decisions are made, policies, and we have some change that prevents this kind of thing from happening in the future.
And you just mentioned the bystander that was breaking down on the stand. Well, many of them have, actually, many of the witnesses in this case. So one of these individuals was talking to George Floyd as he was being held down by police that day. And he was shown in the video of the incident. And today he broke down on the stand. Let's take a look.
Mama.
You're the best guy.
All right. Oh my God.
So now you go to jail.
I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I can't believe this, man.
Can we stop it right here, please?
Mama, look.
Mr. McMahon, do you need a minute?
So Dr. Haines, what's your reaction to that?
I'm traumatized by the repeatedly watching it over and over and even hearing it. It is gut-wrenching.
When you and I were talking earlier, you were talking about the most disturbing part of that whole ordeal. What were you saying then?
Well, it speaks to the contempt that the officers had, not just for Mr. Floyd, but for all the community members. They seem to not respond in any kind of humane way to people pleading for a person's life. The officer doesn't respond when it seems that he expires while his knee is on his neck. And even in fact, the EMTs who show up don't seem to show any concern or urgency about the matter. They're just taking their time. In fact, they're still spreading out the sheets for Mr. Floyd while there's the man with his knee on his neck. It's simply unbelievable to me.
It really is. Mr. Marin, as a civil rights attorney, how are you seeing all of this?
This is conduct that shocks the conscience of a civilized world. And that's the standard for gross violations of the 8th Amendment of our Constitution. So this is totally unacceptable. But I think what really is coming in through this video is that all the bystanders were saying, "You're killing him. Take your foot off his neck. He can't breathe." They're contributing to that. And yet you have Chauvin nonchalantly just ignoring that, staying there. So if the prosecution makes an argument for third-degree murder here, it's going to be because this is conduct that shocks the conscience, and it shows that Chauvin had a depraved mind. He knew that that kind of conduct could very well lead to death, and that is guilty in my mind.
And I wanted to go through those charges in their entirety. So we have second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. And it sounds like you're thinking third-degree murder is what's most likely to stick?
Yes, I mean, the second-degree murder requires an intent to kill. You have to prove that the person intended to kill. And I don't think that there's going to be unanimity on that. But third-degree murder is causing death by actions that are eminently dangerous and that evidence a depraved mind. That is a depraved mind that's acting without regard to the known risk to life. And I think that's clearly evident here. And manslaughter is, if there's somebody who's holding out against third-degree murder, maybe they would agree on manslaughter, which seems absolutely clear to me, because that's just culpable negligence and unreasonable risk of causing serious injury and death. So I think it's probable that they'll convict. And what I hope happens as a result of this, and the society seeing this in detail, how police operate, is that we have some real change. Too many times police arrive at a scene, and then what happens is worse, much worse than what occasioned the call. The parent who has a mentally ill child and wants the police to get some help, and what happens is that the police find that the child won't obey their commands, escalate, and ultimately you have something much more serious, even death in those circumstances.
And it seems like we've seen a number of these cases, especially in the recent past. So Dr. Haines, I want to ask you, a lot of people are trying to gauge just the significance of this trial overall. How do you think it compares to past race and policing trials?
Well, it's interesting. I've heard commentators compare it to trials of 30 years ago, saying this is the most significant trial in 30 years. I believe this is the most significant trial in the past century. In many, many ways, America's law enforcement is on trial here. Is the humanity of Black people respected by our police officers? And what we saw was a complete disregard for the humanity of Mr. Floyd. And not just Mr. Floyd, but in fact, of all the people who were pleading repeatedly, please take your knee off of this man's neck. The disregard for life is tremendous, and I feel that our society will never get over this event if we do not convict. We'll be right back to where we were in the 1930s.
That's hard to imagine. Mr. Marin, I know you were saying this is an exceptional case for a lot of different reasons, but are you getting any sense of which way this case will go at this point in time?
I think it's going to lead to conviction unless Chauvin's defense team figures out how to deflect responsibility to the state, to the system. If he says, look, hey, I'm just doing what I was paid to do, sort of like a soldier who kills somebody on the battlefield, and and then says, well, look, you give me a gun, you give me the uniform, you go tell me to work. Well, I think that is the type of defense that it's dangerous, but it could get the jury to think, he's not really the cause of the problem. He's just an instrument of the cause, and it's a bigger issue. But I think that's a hard defense to sell.
Yeah, well, we'll have to see how it goes. We'll leave it at that. I want to thank our guests tonight, Sacramento civil rights attorney Mark Marin and Dr. Bruce Haines, sociology professor at UC Davis. Thank you both for being with us.
Thank you.
And
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. And
Take
thank you to
care now.
everyone for joining us tonight. Our coverage of day 4 of the Derek Chauvin trial continues tomorrow. Good night.